Hi Taurus, welcome to your August 2024 horoscope. I know I'm smiling and I look quite happy, but I hate to break it to you, August is not the easiest month astrology-wise. And not just for you Taurus, but actually for everybody. This is because we have one of the biggest events, I would say, of 2024 happening in August, which is the square between Jupiter and Saturn. And even though this square doesn't happen until later in the month on August 19th, it is something that we're going to feel building up all throughout August, even in those first 2 weeks of August. This is also because the week before the square, there are a couple of other planets hitting or having aspects with Jupiter and Saturn, and that sort of highlights the story again and again for us, even before we get to that actual square. So because the square between Jupiter and Saturn is such a big deal, let's start off this horoscope by talking more about it. For you, Taurus, Jupiter is in your second house and Saturn is in your 11th house. In general, you can think of this square as a fight, a tension, an arm wrestling battle between optimism, Jupiter, and pessimism, realism, whatever you want to call it, with Saturn. You can also think of this idea of hope and this idea of, a block hitting a stopping point, hitting a wall and feeling like you can't go any further. You can also think of this as fun, positiveness versus work and seriousness. These are in general the types of feelings that we're all going to be wrestling with during the month of August. And for you, Taurus, because this is happening in your 11th and second house, you might especially be feeling this tension with your finances and with your community of friends. So the way that this could manifest, there's many different ways, of course, but you might find yourself feeling very optimistic with your financial situation. But then at the same time, in stark contrast, you feel like that's making you, it's sort of like making you less understood within your community. Maybe you're getting a bit of judgment from your friends. Maybe you are feeling a bit outcast because of this newfound optimism and hope with your finances. And that tension is going to be very much black and white, right? We're talking about a square here. So it's a type of tension that you cannot ignore. It's not just a comment that a friend makes that you're like, okay, that was a bit strange, but whatever, let's ignore it. You might really have to, it might be a type of action where you really have to deal with it. You really have to say something and you have to act on it. It's not something that you can shove under the carpet. Keep in mind, though, I want to highlight one more possibility of how this could manifest. The second house is not only about finances, but it's also about our self-esteem and self-confidence. And specifically because you have Jupiter there, you might especially feel quite powerful in your own ability, quite confident in your own ability to take care of yourself, to provide for yourself. Feeling like you don't need to rely on anybody else to survive and to have a good life here on this earth. And that might come into really big contrast because at the same time, you might feel like, but you do want some acknowledgement, you do want some recognition, you do want a sense of belonging from your community. And that might feel like such a stark contrast because you feel like, okay, logically, I know I can provide for myself. I know I can take care of myself. I know I don't need anybody else. But there's this other part of you that feels heavy, that feels stuck, that feels not so hopeful about the fact that we all still need connection. We all still need a sense of belonging, a sense of a community. And the contrast between those two, again, will be difficult to ignore. So even though this is happening on the 19th of August, let's talk about the whole week leading up to the square. As I shared earlier, you'll be feeling the square building up more and more as the month goes along, but you might especially be feeling this from the 14th of August. And this is because on the 14th of August, Mars will conjunct Jupiter and square Saturn a day later on the 15th. Going a few days ahead, Venus also gets into this Jupiter and Saturn conversation. Venus opposes Saturn and squares Jupiter on August 18th. And then finally, we have August 19th, which is the Jupiter and Saturn square. So to sort of translate this to how it might manifest to all of our lives, to translate what's happening above to down here on Earth, you might find that when Mars conjuncts Jupiter in your second house, you are taking some courageous action, inspired by your hope, motivated by your optimism, to get your finances into better order, to apply for a new job, to ask for a raise at work. You are taking a courageous action to be able to support yourself and not rely on others. Maybe you used to receive money from somebody in your life, and on this day, you do the scary thing and you tell them, I do not need your support anymore. I can do it on my own. So these are, again, just some examples of how the Mars-Jupiter conjunction might manifest for you, Taurus. Later, the day later though, Mars also squares Saturn. So it might be that even though you're taking this courageous action, which is based on optimism and hopefulness, that the desired outcome is not the way that you wanted it to go. That the outcome is not as you wished it would be. Because of that square with Saturn, you might find that you hit a wall. You might find that the friend says, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm still going to give you money. You might find that you want to be self-sufficient, but you end up losing your job. And then you feel like there's no more optimism there to be had. You feel a bit down on your own ability to be able to provide for yourself, which can have an effect on your self-confidence as well. So even though you're taking courageous actions, the outcome is not as desired. A couple of days later, on the 18th, this is when we have Venus opposing Saturn and squaring Jupiter. For you, Taurus, Venus is opposing Saturn from your 5th house. And the way I see this opposition with Venus and Saturn is that this sort of block, this sort of reality check that you and all of us are going to have to face in August is also putting a damper on your ability to have fun, your ability to enjoy pleasures in life. And honestly, we're talking a lot about the second house and finances. So it might also be that, a quite literal manifestation might be that you don't have the financial security to be able to go out anymore, to be able to treat yourself to a nice dinner or to a fun day, or to be able to indulge on some of the finer things in life. And because we are talking about Venus here, this might also put a bit of a damper on your ability to enjoy the finer pleasures of life, on your self-esteem, on your self-confidence. And this is all going to happen even a day before the actual square as well. So this is why I think this whole week, from the 13th to the 19th, is really going to be quite a central week about this whole conversation between Saturn and Jupiter. So if you didn't think it could get any worse, I'm sorry to break it to you, but this square on the 19th actually happens during a full moon. I know, how crazy. So this means that on the square, on the 19th, the sun and the moon are opposing each other in the sky. And this is going to add a lot more potent energy to the square. For you, Taurus, the sun is going to be in your 4th house and the moon in your 10th. So that means that your home and your career are going to be a part of this conversation. You might feel like at home you feel recognized, appreciated, you feel like you fit in and like you belong. But when it comes to your career or when it comes to the image that others have of you out there in the world, you might feel like you don't belong. You might feel a bit like an outcast. You might feel like people view you a bit strange or maybe judge you for your current financial situation. So keep in mind that actually for all of us, the square between Jupiter and Saturn, the battle between optimism and realism, between hope and feeling stuck, actually underlying of all of that, a lot of us will feel like outcasts. A lot of us will feel like we don't belong. For each of us, it's going to be in different areas of our life. And for you, Taurus, that will be with your career or with the public persona, the public contribution that you give to the rest of the world. So we talked a little bit about Venus with this Jupiter and Saturn square. But I think Venus has 2 other a bit more challenging stories, some challenging experiences to bring our way during the month of August. In the beginning of the month, Venus squares Uranus, which is in your 1st house. Uranus is the planet of surprises and sudden changes. So you might, especially at the beginning of the month, feel like there is some sudden change that really affects the way you show up in the world, the way you carry yourself, maybe even the way you dress, the way you show up and talk when you meet others. And then at the end of the month, Venus will oppose Neptune. Neptune is the planet of dreams, the planet of illusions, the planet of also spirituality, you could say, in one way or another. So towards the end of the month, you also might feel like there are certain illusions, certain dreams that you might have had about belonging, about the community that you are a part of, that might be falling away, that might be getting challenged. And honestly, with everything that we've talked about, with everything happening with the Jupiter and Saturn square, I think it really makes sense that there might be some type of realizations about certain dreams, certain hopes that weren't grounded in anything realistic, that were a bit of illusions that you might need to let go of. And again, because this is happening in your 11th house, Taurus, for you especially, it might be that you're letting go of certain friendships. It might be that you're letting go of certain groups that you belong to. It might be that you're letting go of certain social causes that you're contributing to. And again, as we talked about earlier with the Jupiter and Saturn square, this might be motivated because of your financial situation, but it could also be motivated because of the impact that your financial situation is having on your self-confidence and your self-esteem. All right, I promise those are all the challenging things for the month of August. Before we close off, let's close off on a good note. Let's close off with the new moon happening on August 4th, because the new moon is actually quite pleasant, quite calm. It's a breath of fresh air, before we all dive into the craziness later in August. The new moon is happening in Leo in your 4th house, Taurus. During this new moon, remember we have Mars and Jupiter in your second house of finances, your second house of self-confidence and self-esteem. And there are many ways this new moon could manifest. One of those ways could be that a lot of your focus is more directed towards your home rather than your career or the ways others perceive you or the role you play in society. And keep in mind that, Leo is a sign that wants recognition, that wants to be acknowledged for how amazing they are. And we also have Mars and Jupiter in the sign of Gemini, which is very talkative, can tend to overextend themselves. So be careful that during this new moon, you don't overextend yourself asking for recognition. You don't overextend yourself in terms of your finances, and you don't overextend yourself in terms of expressing yourself so much within your home and forgetting to do that with the rest of the world, within your career or within your community and with your friends as well. So overall, Taurus, I promise it's not just you that might be having a difficult time in August. It's all of us. This Jupiter and Saturn square is happening for everybody. So you got this. If you ever feel like you're having a hard time, you can always reach out to those around you and touch base on what it is that you're going through, because most likely they're also going through something as well. Keep in mind that even though this financial situation might be taking a hit on your feelings of belonging, on your feelings of self-confidence, that you do still belong and that you can still do it. And keep in mind that this square will go away eventually, and your finances will pick up again. Thank you so much for joining me, Taurus. You got this. Go ahead and crush August. And don't forget, before you close this video, before you click on the next one, I am doing a giveaway. When we reach 1,000 subscribers, I am giving one of you a free reading. So if you want to get a chance to win that free reading, then make sure you hit the subscribe button. Thanks, Taurus. I hope to see you again soon.